On his farewell speech, George Washington warned the American people of how harmful a two-political party system could be. By letting the American people know that in the course of time, the parties will become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will enable to subvert of power of the people. And now in 2025, this is more important than ever, because if you're not red or blue, you are left outside of the political spectrum. I am Juan Collado Díaz, and this is Político. Hi everybody, and welcome once again to another episode of Político. As always, I am your host, Juan Collado Díaz, and today with me I have Adam Brandon. He is the Senior Advisor of the Independence Center. And if you remember in the last episode, I interviewed his boss, Laura, who is the Executive Director. But to know Adam, we need to know a little bit more about his background and where he came from, because his political work is actually amazing. And he's trying to get people to declare their independency by leaving the two political party systems and move away from the partisan politics that are affecting us every day. Adam is a political bridge builder, passionate about working with anyone who shares a common belief or a goal, just like me. So Adam, without further ado, do you mind sharing a little bit about you and what got you into the world of politics?
So, appreciate that. So Adam Brandon, I originally come from, and I'm very proud, Cleveland, Ohio. I still have a love-hate relationship with my professional football team. And, I'm married, live here in Alexandria, Virginia. My wife is the smart one, literally. She has a PhD in nuclear science, got a couple kids. And I spent most of my career at FreedomWorks, and I spent the last 10 years as the president. And then last May, I had the incredibly difficult decision to shut the organization down. And it was, and actually the Politico ran the main story about it. And what was so hard about that decision is that after you spend so long working on something, but the base of grassroots activists that we used at FreedomWorks, unfortunately, they moved to becoming more MAGA. And so a lot of the limited government things that we were pushing, we found it very difficult. Do you stay on principle with your values, or do you shift where your audience went? And so we decided to stay on the principles and close the institution. Now, what happened in the meantime is we were starting to do research on this growing independent movement, but we didn't know anything about it, and a lot of our data was outdated. So we started doing some research, and what we started finding is that this, at least 40%, maybe 50%, depends on what poll you're looking at, but it's roughly half of the population is now politically homeless. They are independent. And when we asked them about their value set, it boiled down into two things. On social issues, they wanted what they call, they tend to be, I'm not going to say they're, the old the phrase is I'm socially liberal and fiscally conservative. And that's actually pretty accurate. And so on social issues, the main thing they are looking for is tolerance. And so what tolerance means is like, look, I don't have to put my pronouns on my email. It's not that I dislike gays. I'm just not comfortable doing that. But we could be great neighbors. We could have different religious views and be great neighbors. On other issues we saw like marijuana, people were like, look, I don't care what consenting adults do in their own home. I just don't want you walking down the street, lighting up a spliff where I have to explain to my kids what that smell is all the time. So they take these kind of nuanced views, which on social issues, which are not in most American politics today. Even on contentious issues like abortion, they may be pro-choice, but they're more Bill Clinton, safe, legal, and rare. And they're not for late-term abortion. But it's like you go to each party, one party wants to ban it all, and the other wants to, just have all the abortions, no restrictions. This is a group that wants something in the middle. And then on economic issues, they came to us and they kept saying, we want more choices. I want more choices in healthcare. I want more choices in how I fund my retirement. I want more choices where my kids go to school. I want more choices in where I live, but I can't because of the mortgage rates. So you start putting this platform together of social tolerance and greater economic choice. That is actually closer to my classical liberal values that we were trying to do at FreedomWorks. But you had to take this leap of faith and be like, you know what, we got to put the two parties behind us. And even though this is what I see this group doing, I'm willing to work with Democrats. I'm willing to work with Republicans. I'm willing to work with anyone on these issues, since it is a mix. And I look at issues like healthcare. There are in immigration, and you take the issue. There is a mix between right and left. that is incredibly possible, and you can legislate this stuff and solve problems. So why don't we do that? And my main issue is spending. I know this is a long way to intro myself, but my main issue has always been spending. And one of the lessons I've learned is there's no Republican or Democrat way to solve our debt and deficit crisis. You're going to need a bipartisan solution, and those are really hard to do. And so we figured the best way to do that is to work with this independent voter bloc, so you actually have a mass of voters who are large enough to challenge the current political establishment, and then be able to do new things and actually push for some of these solutions to all of these issues.
So we were talking about this. We mentioned several times independent voters. Yes. Now, it's a term that has become very popular, as you said, because people are politically homeless. Mm-hmm. And so how does someone figure out when they become an independent voter? How does someone actually know, like, that moment that, how do you think like that happens?
Great
like,
question.
I'm an independent voter, like, and I do not agree left or right anymore.
So the first thing you look at is demographics. And so we are used to a political system that is catering to baby boomers. And the way we advertise caters to baby boomers. The way we talk about issue sets cater to baby boomers. And what has happened is that this last election, you saw the shift. And for the next 20 years, the next 2 decades, the plurality of your electorate is going to be millennial. So all these problems that we just talked about, it's going to be up to millennials to solve these things, period. And if you put millennials and Gen X, this is the largest demographic for the next 20 years, easy. So why would you not want to go and talk to these folks? But what you see is that what the data shows, and I often cite Gallup, who's been tracking this since the 1980s, what they show is this break was because the younger voters overwhelmingly break, majority independent, millennials and below. And older voters tend to be more partisan. So if you look at it just as an aggregate of everyone, it's one thing. When you start looking at these demographic differences, that's when you have your, I'm not going to say it, oh shoot moment, when you realize that this next generation, which is coming on strong, is overwhelmingly independent. And then what's the correlation there? This is a young generation that grew up with the internet, and they're used to 50 different types of peanut butter. I'm 47. I grew up with Skip and Jiffy. Those were my choices. Coke and Pepsi, Miller Lite and Bud Light. One of 3 networks. We had one paper in Cleveland. Now it's a complete. So this is a younger generation. It's like it doesn't make sense to them. Why would I have to be in one of these 2 parties? It makes no sense. I don't have to do this anywhere else in my life. So the main driver that we see is the age, the demographics, and so when you do polling, most polling goes and asks American, are you Republican or Democrat? What's your favorite ice cream as long as it's chocolate or vanilla? And so the voter goes, well, wait a second, I want strawberry. And they're like, okay, that's cool. But really, between chocolate and vanilla, which one do you like? And if you had to pick, which one do you want? And so by asking questions that way, what happens is we force people into these 2 camps that they don't actually want to be. So when we started doing our research and asking people, what's your favorite ice cream color or ice cream, and just let it happen, and people would come up, well, I want strawberry. Well, strawberry isn't chocolate or vanilla. And so all of a sudden, when you start asking the questions a little bit differently, you allow space for this independent to open up. But primarily, what you got to understand about the independent is they're younger. And by younger in politics, I mean under age 45, which, as someone who's 47, I love the fact that young is 40, 45 and below. But in a city that's dominated by 70 and 80-year-olds, oh, yeah, these are young people.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I'm also from Cleveland. I don't know if I mentioned that before.
Oh, no kidding. Here we go.
I currently am in Cleveland. I keep hearing Cleveland. I'm like, I need to mention that. Yeah. So I do understand the Cleveland part. I love Cleveland. Live in Cleveland. I've been here for a while, so definitely love the city. I got to say something about my upbringing on that, though.
I grew up in a community that was mostly recent immigrant in the sense that most of our families came over at some place between the 1880s and 1920s. I look at my friends, they all had really ethnic last names. Most of my friends have really big, thick Slavic necks. So we all come from different parts of the world. And then we also, in Cleveland, you do have people who are white collar and blue collar that still mix together pretty readily. But I noticed, and yes, we have our problems. It's a horrifically divided city among racial lines. I like to think it's getting better. But for the most part, when I look at the experience of Cleveland, it is the American experience. And and I think that upbringing So I do have a good understanding of what globalization has done. I mean, I love the steel mill in Cleveland, but my goodness, I mean, compared to my dad's stories, it's a different world. And so I understand what's good and bad. And I think a lot of that is because I came from that wonderful hometown.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, now that you were talking about that, how we have such divided communities, but also communities that overlook at times that left versus right, red versus blue. You know,
yep.
Just perspective that they look outside of the matrix. You know, we're coded to just be left or right, but they look outside of it. And Cleveland has been shown to be such a progressive city. I know most voters that are either outside of the left or right, or they don't even say like I'm red or I'm blue. They just say like I'm more like socialist Democrat, or I'm more like a conservative libertarian. Like I've seen that moving away really hard. And as you mentioned, it has a lot to do with the generation and people. But also, do you think then the government, the efficiency of the government, seeing the left and the right, red and blue, the efficiency that they have shown, which is like very little to none in the last like 5 to 8, like even 9 years we have seen from both parties. Do you think that's also one of the reasons why voters are moving away and becoming more independent?
You know how, well, so one of the, here's one of my most controversial things I'll probably say. One of my big lessons from the last election is the value of money in politics is going down. Now, I didn't get a chance to answer. My role at the Independence Center primarily is I do strategy, I do some fundraising, and I help set up the C3, the C4, and the PAC. I'm kind of doing, you know, work with all of these. But you know, when I think back on you know, why I'm doing all of this, a lot of this does come back to, I look at these promises that have been made and with all the money that's being put behind these political promises. And so what's happening is, as the value of money in American politics is going down, I'm going to say this again, the value of money in politics is going down. And what is replacing it is this concept of authenticity. So the more authentic you are, your AOCs and your Trumps, that's why they're perceived as authentic. They do better. And so traditional politicians need that money to kind of cover up their kind of hypocrisies, right? Like, we're Republicans and we're here about shrinking government. Like, you can't look at this bill. It's going to add, I mean, deficits are going up, guys. They're going up. They're not going down. So your younger voter, when you take all the political money and throw ads at them, it doesn't matter to them anymore, because the other thing that the young voters know is the bill is coming for them. The bill for all of this debt is going to nail these millennials. And so what these millennials are going to be faced with is, they're struggling to buy a house. They're struggling to pay off their student loans. They're doing their best to save for retirement. And then all of a sudden, they're going to see their taxes go up dramatically to pay for the inability of baby boomers to get spending under control. So damn right they're upset. And so that was one thing that was shocking to us when we started this project, was we thought we'd have to educate these younger voters. No, they know exactly what's up. And they're pissed that this bill is coming on to them. So there was another group that did a survey of like 2,600 young people. 76% want to reform Medicare and Social Security. 76%. Now, they don't know what they want to do with it yet. They just know it needs to be fixed. And what's interesting is, we've engaged with them. What they're also telling us is, like, it's also process. What they're expecting is a process that brings Republicans and Democrats in a table, and we have like a political fight, but over, with green eye shades and data and speeches. That's what they're looking for. And so they're like, look, if you two guys can come together, Republicans and Democrats, and you can bash this through, and you come up with a solution that everyone gets something they want and everyone loses something that they want, sign us up. And so that's what's so exciting to me. Again, money is going down in value, authenticity is going up. And I think that those are trends that you relay those back to, the millennial generation who seeks authenticity. This old politics of like, hey, you can't vote. I may have not been able to, I'm going to run on cutting spending. Well, actually, we're not going to do that. But look, if you don't vote for me, these Democrats are really bad. And so by going independent, it flips it, right? So then the Democrat says it like, oh, I can't, we may have not made our campaign promises, but look, the Republicans are all fascists. Independents have the ability to get in there and say, stop calling them fascists, stop calling them socialists. calm your stuff down. Let's get in a room and actually start trying to solve one of these problems for America. And by the way, we see a lot of solutions that if you mix a little of left and right, you can actually get everyone to the table. And that's what this generation is looking for. And that's what gives me my optimism of the future of the country, because there is a path forward now for us to take this political temperature down.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I said one of the things that I talked about a second ago was at the beginning, how we this left versus right battle and, going back to it, like red, blue and that stuff. And we talk about government efficiency. And one of the things that I think we saw in the last presidency was leadership. Nobody really understood or knew where leadership was. And one thing you said, I'm a Gen Z. Well, I don't look Gen Z, but I'm Gen Z. I'm a 2000s baby. And so what I noticed, a lot of even young voters like me, in the last presidency, we didn't know who was our leader. We didn't really have a leader in our country. And that's the reason why this last election went as crazy as it went, where, the first time I think I ever seen so many candidates throw their names and run for either the Republican, Democrat, and even independent parties. It was one of the largest times. It was a waking time to see all these different parties out there. And I think that had to do with leadership, and leadership is so important in the parties. And I think, maybe you also share this view, but the left and right, or red versus blue, both parties are lacking in good leadership currently.
So here's why I think that is. And I don't think the parties are going to be able to recover from this. And so there's a few reasons. Number one, you've got the problem with the primaries. And so with your primary, you need votes and you need money. So the two ways you get that is you throw the biggest pieces of red meat against a wall and just see what sticks. And so it kind of encourages, and I think this is a downside of a lot of how we're trying to, with social media, news media coverage has gone from being kind of covering the news to political entertainment. And so what happens is that it just becomes more about getting through that red meat echo chamber, which if you look at it, you're talking about maybe 10-15% of the base on either side. That's who's dominating American politics. And it's going to be hard to get around that. So if you're running for office, you've got to make certain commitments to those those bases that makes it hard to pivot later on. But guess what? If there's no independent, it doesn't matter. There's no one in the center. Doesn't matter. You can get away with that. And that's why by trying to give some competition, by putting independents on the ballot, all of a sudden we're going to have this incredible moment where you're going to have another choice, which means the base Republican and base Democrat, they're going to have to get a little bit more serious about how they're dealing with issues, because they're going to get called out on the carpet. And we just got back from Michigan doing some focus groups, and that was what they told us. What appeals to them about independence is it has the ability to hold both parties accountable. And they don't trust one party to hold the other party accountable. But I got to tell you, what I know from my position now, and I didn't know this a few months ago, there are multiple, I know of 3 serious candidates for governor as independents this cycle. I know of, let's say, 2, maybe 3 serious independents running for Senate. And I know a bunch of House. And what you're going to see is there are going to be more independents on the ballot this cycle than ever before. And so that's why when I've been talking to people in the press, I'm like, if you're not starting to cover these independents, and some of them I think are going to win. And I hate to say this because this is the knock on independence, is that we're going to be spoilers. I hate to say it. Some of them may end up being spoilers, which is not the goal. I mean, my goal is to support independents who can win. And I would never encourage anyone to get involved in a race if they didn't see a path to victory. I think a path just to screw around with the election that's a disservice. But if you've got a path, look at Don Bacon's district. Okay, that is a district that votes for Democrats and Republicans. An independent could win in that district. And that's one, there's 435 congressional districts, only 25 districts have the capacity to flip back and forth. That's one of them. There's 5 in Southern California, a couple in Michigan, a couple in Colorado, a couple in Arizona, and that's and a few, elsewhere. But I think that's where this change is going to come. I do think you're going to see some significant governors elected as independent. I think you're going to see some shockers in the Senate elected as independent, and you're going to see some people in the House independent. So if this happens, what that means is everyone's talking about Donald Trump and can Republicans hold the House. I don't think that's the storyline. I think the storyline is going to be how independents are going to shock the world. And I'm just looking at the numbers and then people I know who are running. And with those two things alone, I see enough that this is going to happen. And if this happens, this is the narrative. And God bless it. That's what this country needs, is to kind of shake some of this stuff up. And how cool would it be in the nation's 250th anniversary when I saw Gallup did a poll today showing that the belief in the United States and pride in the United States is at record lows now. How about we shock the world and we actually kind of come to, okay, we can come together and elect really good leaders, people whose interests are not in the parties, but are in actually solving problems. And that's what I think these independents are going to do, is they've got an ability to have credible leadership much more than either party does.
Exactly. And, with that, I want to go over, when we're talking about independence, and I think a lot of viewers kind of struggle at home. And this is also myself. And I think in the episode that it's being released on the 30th of June, which is today when we're recording, it's with Laura, which is the president or the executive director of the Independence Center.
Yep.
And
my boss.
Your boss. There you go. One thing that I talked with her about was registering as an independent voter in many states. It's kind of impossible. Here in Ohio, a couple years ago, there was a ballot issue that I wanted to vote for. And for me to do so, I needed to declare my Republican or Democrat. There was no other. So it's either red or blue. I couldn't do anything outside of that. And it upset me because I don't really align with either or. Okay, but I have to choose one.
This upsets me so much. So the taxpayers are paying for these damn elections that they're told you have to be in club red or club blue to participate in. If you're a taxpayer, you should be able to participate in an election, full stop. And it always drives me nuts that taxpayers pay for these, Republican and Democratic primaries. Look, if you're not going to let everyone vote in the election, then have your own primary and pay for it yourself. Don't expect the taxpayer to pay for it. And I do think electoral reform didn't do so well in this last election. And I think one of the reasons is just it's a newer issue. But I think independents what you're going to see is they're going to start blowing this issue up. And you're going to see more and more, whether it's ranked choice or some of these other types of systems coming in. Because again, the two parties have rigged the system for their own benefit. And what you mentioned in Ohio is part of it. And people go back to the Constitution. The Constitution says we have a speaker, but it doesn't say majority and minority leader. And in George Washington and these founding fathers, when they were leaving office and they were doing their farewell addresses and warnings, they were warning against factionalism, i.e. partisanship, as what could end up destroying the country. So I actually think when Benjamin Franklin was talking about it's a republic if you could keep it, that's one of the things he was talking about. Don't descend into petty factions. And again, the younger generations aren't there. I don't see them coming around to partisanship. And so that's why I look at this. I've got a donor who told me that this project is either going to be it's either right on time or it's ahead of its time. So one of the ways it's going to happen, with or without us. So I like to think we're right on time and we could be part of ushering in this independent era. But even if we fail, someone else is going to do it, because I just see the numbers. This is where it's going.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things with our generation, the Gen Zs, and now soon to get becoming voters, the alphas. We're definitely seeing this. We're definitely seeing our people and our generations are becoming more independent. They're less of the parties, and us, the younger generation, screaming, and just letting our voices be known. We're also bringing those older voters who are no, I have to be either in the red box or the blue box now to also come out. I myself, my mother was a strong conservative for the longest, and though she was very, very liberal in human rights and stuff, she was very conservative in many other aspects. And I have to kind of break that shell and tell her, you're not really a conservative. You're more of an independent. You don't fit in either box, but you're out there. And I think that really helped her to understand more. And I think I also got people, one of the things that I noticed is they just write down ballots. It's just either you do red or blue. You just go on and you just vote for one party. And I kind of I've been doing some education around letting people know, and that's part of this series with the podcast, declaring your independence, pretty much, which is, I think, it's you guys' motto too. Declare your independence. I think that's one of the biggest things is learn that that ballot, you don't have to only vote for one party. You can just click boxes. It's like you're doing your state exam or something. You can do separate boxes.
So it used to be, what did you need the party for? The party was important for ballot access. It was important for, fundraising and putting a system behind you. It was important for voter turnout. And for the voters, it was important for sources of information. I feel like I'm describing the New York taxis in 1980 right now by saying that. You don't need the parties for any of that now, any of it. AI, you could get in there and put in, here's my political values, who should I vote for? Perplexity or ChatGPT will start helping you out there. So I think you're looking at a huge turning point in just information. And so and then also with funding, one challenge that I face with the independent centers, that if I talk to you and you're under 50, you tend to pick up on this project like that. Older donors tend to have a harder time with it, unfortunately for me, because those are the donors that have all the cash. So and that's one lesson I've also learned, is that in American politics, your funding class is kind of like yesterday's class. And that the rising generation, well, we're all dead broke for the most part, right? We're trying to figure out how to pay for mortgages and pay for kids, and I know you've got a young kid, and
all the debt.
Yeah, it's not cheap, right? And so I kind of roll my eyes when I hear people saying like go out and make more babies. It's like, we probably would like to. Do you know how hard that is? So when an 80-year-old is lecturing me about having more babies, I don't like that, because I like talking to other young parents who understand the costs of all of this. But these are just different ways of looking at things. Look, older generations, they're used to the Cold War. If Vietnam falls, the Reds win and the United States loses. The younger generation grew up with the internet era and the post-Cold War, where we're used to autonomous networks that come together on projects and then they fall apart, and that's what they're designed to do. We're used to working in, I think the average person's switching jobs, every 3 years now? So you're used to change in a way that older generations are not. And I think that shows up in the politics, because younger voters just do not feel they have this, there's no reason for them to align with either party. And again, but I do think you said something that's very important, is as the younger voters start to embrace these independents, I think older voters are going to be like, well, crap, I want one of these things too. I want one of these to represent me, these smart people who don't yell at me all the time. And again, when I talk about spending, you're not going to be able to fix our spending problem in the United States unless you touch Social Security, Medicare. And as you see what's happening right now on the Hill, it's a very difficult thing to do. What we need to start to do is have an intergenerational conversation where we show older Americans, we're not going to take your benefits away. I know you need them, but we need to change these systems. Because if we don't change these systems, the next generation is completely screwed. And when I give this speech to older Americans, they first of all, they didn't know this information. And so when I share them the information, they're like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know how out of balance the system is. And I think that we have to come up with a program that not only is right and left, red and blue, but is also younger voters and older voters. And that's the only way we're going to fix these things. But you're going to have to get beyond the partisan conversations to do that.
Absolutely. And that's, one thing that's this platform, through this podcast, that's one of the things that I ambition to do, is create that separation of left versus right, red versus blue, and bring people. And I know, I've gotten so much from different people who are strong left or strong blue, strong red, left or right, and I have to kind of walk them through the process. My podcast, this platform is not a platform to create a partisan. On the contrary, it's a platform to show people the parties are failing us. The political arena is not on our side anymore, but we have to make it to where we, the people, are battling this. And one of the things that is affecting us is loyalism. And this whole entire time we'll be talking about loyalism, in a way, and it is how people have become so loyal to their party, the color that they're affiliated with. We have seen you either red or blue. There's no in between this day, sadly, and we're really trying. And the younger generation is the ones doing that.
And they're going to, and I do think I do think you're going to see the rise of the purple. I really do. Exactly. But when I just think about these issue sets, again, I come from the more libertarian center right, or on that side, but I tend to kind of group with people on the left when it comes to basic civil liberties issues. We have the same suspicions of an all-powerful state. So I could disagree with AOC all day, but if we could work together on, I mean, I've got serious concerns. I'm not saying that I'm not putting on my tinfoil hat here, but putting the government on all these AI databases, like I'm one who's watching the power of this information. And we have to be very careful if we're going to invest the centralized federal government with this much data authority over every American. So that's an issue where hypothetically, I mean, that was an issue that animated the Tea Party. I wish that could kind of come back a little bit, but that's something I could work with the left on. But on the right, there's other issues that I could work with the right on. And then if you look at, not to get really kick a hornet's nest, poll after poll, they usually show that healthcare is one of America's top concerns. And what I think we have the opportunity to do is we need to shift the entire conversation from employer-sponsored healthcare to individual healthcare. You shift the funding and the subsidy from there over here, and you could create a system then where you can go to the left and say, look, every American is getting healthcare coverage. We're going to give everyone a voucher to go get healthcare coverage. Check that box. You go back to the right and say, but we're going to create a system where you take that voucher in the private sector, so you're going to have markets very involved delivering these systems. And so you've got a benefit for the right and a benefit for the left. And I think that is only possible if independents are the ones who come up with this type of solution and then go to both sides and be like, we're going to take your thing. You may like this, you may not, but you're definitely going to put in your main thing in here. And that's the way we got to go forward on this. And actually, I think it was Senator Curtis from Utah, the new senator from Utah. I believe I heard in a speech, he said something on immigration. He's like, we can be a country that is a country of laws and also a country that's full of compassion. And I think when you think of politics today, it's usually you got to be one of these two things, right? You're either doing this extreme or this extreme. No, actually, the solution is somewhere in the middle. It really is somewhere in the middle. And again, that's my optimism, is that you have this younger generation looking for these solutions. And I also look at how you shift. We're having a conversation here. If I was on Fox News, I would have 3 minutes? Of which you, the host, would take 1.5 minutes. So I probably have 4 or 5 sentences. How the hell am I going to explain Social Security reform in 4 or 5 sentences?
We will be arguing the entire time. It doesn't matter, which platform it is, because I've seen it in either platform where it doesn't become anymore. It's not anymore about just talking. Now it's like scream on TV and make it look pretty. And and as you also said, there's all this information out there. We have so much, and then you just go on TV and they just scream it. One episode that I did early into this season of Politico was with Michael Walker, and he talked about the power of AI. And we talked a little bit about the power of AI in elections and how it could affect, but also help in a way. And it's always, it's always everything in the wrong hands can be bad.
Yes.
Anything in the wrong hands can be bad. And I feel that AI in the hands of the government can be really bad option for people on the way that they're changing. I mean, the White House has been using it, as we've seen this past election, to create their official communication pages into memes. And now everything is kind of like, you don't know what's real and what's not anymore.
Right.
Which puts us, the voters, also in a way like, what is going on? It's confusion. And I think that's, that's part of the problem. So I think this is like a last question from me that I have for you, and it is, how do we, the people, move away from the red versus blue voting into the purple?
So the first thing, everyone, you've got to look into yourself and just be like, am I perpetuating the problem by being part of this? Like voting straight party line? So like when we sit around at the Independence Center talking about this, we're not trying to create a third party. We're trying to create a frickin' movement. Because when we look at the biggest societal changes in American politics, it was the civil rights movement, which changed both parties. The women's suffragette movement changed both parties. The abolitionist movement became a party, but it started as a movement. It actually started in 1776 in Philadelphia. And so great change in America starts as a movement that ends up changing both parties. And so that's one thing that Americans have control over. The second thing is groups like mine and others, we're going to go work our tails off to give you choices. And so this election cycle, and I'm talking about the PAC and all of that I'm working with, just to show you how little people paid attention to independence. Like Joe Smith for Wisconsin Senate 2050 is registered already, but the independent PAC, I just signed up for it. I just got it. No one had it. Like, how no one registered that. So we're going to be operating through the independent PAC. Places like California, places like Michigan, places like Florida, places like, well, there's a few states I don't want to mention to give it away, but there's going to be a series of places where a lot of voters are going to get a choice. And then what we hope is that if this movement is building and you start getting a choice, and the candidates we're trying to work with, these are people who, I like to say, their lives are better outside of Congress than inside. And so these are people, when I've talked to them, like, look, I'll go. I'll put my life on hold. I'll put my medical practice on hold. I'll put my, whatever, I'll stop teaching for a couple of years, but I got to get back to this. And I'm like, brilliant. Just come, be an honest person, try to work well with others, be a leader, call out BS. One thing we didn't talk about that is like, look, we've seen a lot of violence in America recently, not just against each other, but against politics. If we don't tune that down, that's going to become part of our lives. And I really think about that shooting in Minnesota, how it didn't have a long-term effect. The outrage was like a day or so. And it's like, if we are becoming so numb to political violence that assassinating elected officials only carries the news for one day, we're in a lot of trouble. So that means you've got to start declaring your independence. You've got to let these politicians know you're no longer you're independent. So anyone who wants to call their congressman and say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm switching my registration, that's going to carry some water. That's going to get people's attention. And at the end of the day, the reason we are setting up to have a C3, a C4 in the PAC is we need to have the C3 and the C4 work with this movement, but we're also going to have that, make sure we give this movement some political ability to vote. Right? And look, you're going to be hearing a lot about this, a guy who's going to be running for independent as governor of California. So if you don't live in his state, you can still send him cash. You could still tell your friends and text anyone you know in California about how important it is to get out and support this guy. So what I'm excited about is I think there is a movement building. And I think next year, when people go to vote, they're going to finally have that choice: chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to ask you, do you have anything you want to add for our listeners? And also, how can the listeners join the Independent Center and, be able to contribute and help out?
So I would say to people who are listening, don't be cynical. This is your country. Democracy is not a spectator sport. If you don't get involved, that's a problem. The founders of this system set it up, designed so you would get involved. And you don't have to get involved with the Republican or Democratic Party. You can get involved. People don't realize the power of calling their congressman and their senator. And if you want to be super powerful, every congressman and senator has an office near you. Maybe an hour away. Maybe you got to drive a little bit if you're in a big district. But my goodness, please go and make your voice heard and say to them, I'm now an independent. That will send shockwaves through the system. And this is only going to work if people join. And so you can go to independencecenter.org. That's where we are. That's where we're going to be trying to help people. Whether we're going to try and do socials. We have our first socials coming up here in a couple days, where people are actually going to start getting around at bars and just having a beer and talking, and we'll do a little presentation. But don't let yourself get cynical. Stay involved. Take control of your own destiny, because you don't watch the TV and complain. Get involved, guys. And if you do that, we're fine. We're great. We're going to be able to solve these problems, and the next generation isn't doomed.
Well, as I said again, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Well, I want to end with like a Go Browns, but I hate my football team so much. So maybe a Go Cavs or something like that with you. Hey, we got a WNBA team coming. I'm like more excited about that than I am my Cleveland Browns now. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm not a Browns fan. I can't be, and now they're trying to do the whole stadium thing. I can't be a fan of them at all, period. Thanks so much for listening. If you are enjoying Politico, make sure to listen and follow on all podcasting platforms. If you are interested in learning more about the topic that we spoke today, follow the show notes at www.politicopod.com. Politico is an Inquisitor Media original production hosted by me, Juan Collado Díaz. If you want to learn more about the work we do on our advocacy work, make sure to follow or visit Politico at www.politicopod.com.